All right, Autumn, we are good to go.
Okay, hold on a sec. Okay, sorry about that. It was really dark in my office. Okay, so we'll welcome everybody to TCC meeting for January 12th. We'll just hold off on the approval of the agenda and do that when we do the consent. Do we have anybody that wants to give any public comment? Nobody ever wants to do public comment, at least not at the beginning, right? There'll be another opportunity if so. With that, we can do a motion to approve both our agenda and the consent agenda at the same time. If everybody's looked at their agenda, we have a number of consent agenda items on there. Just want to give opportunity. Most of those are resolution of support, so it's pretty simple and straightforward. But does anyone have any questions about any of those items that we need to pause and discuss? And if not, if someone wants to make a motion to approve the agenda and the consent agenda, that would be great.
This is Jana Bianculli. I move to approve the regular agenda as well as the consent agenda, including the November minutes.
Okay, is there a second?
William, hi, I'll make a second.
Okay. And if there's not any discussion, then someone at Linda Scott want to take us through roll call?
Biltmore Forest, Harry Buckner.
Yes.
Buncombe Transit, William High.
Approve.
Clyde, Joy Garland.
Approved.
Fletcher, Eric Rufa.
Aye.
Haywood County, Jody Ferguson. Henderson County, Autumn Radcliffe.
Aye.
Apple Country Transit, Jana Bianculli.
Aye.
Maggie Valley, Caitlin Finkel.
Aye.
Mars Hill, Nathan Bennett.
Aye.
Mills River, Daniel Cobb. Woodfin, Ricky Hurley.
Aye.
NCDOT Division 13, Hannah Cook. DOT Division 14, Steve Williams.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Did I miss anyone? Has anyone hopped on since then?
Jessica Trotman and Matt Cable have done.
Black Mountain, Jessica Trotman. Buncombe County, Matt Cable.
Aye.
Okay, well, we will move into our business items. First thing on business is election of TCC chair and vice chair. You've got your stuff there. Both William and I are able to do another term. If anyone has a burning desire that you wish, I'm sure we'll be happy to entertain that. So if anybody wants to nominate themselves, you guys go for it. This would be our last one that we could do. We can handle that as one motion for both positions, or we can handle those separately. So I'll just leave that out to y'all for discussion.
This is Caitlin Finkel with Maggie Valley. I'd make a motion to approve you all if you're both willing to serve again as chair and vice chair for your final term.
Jana Bianculli, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. So unless there's any discussion from anyone, I'll turn that back over to Tristan and MPO staff.
Hey. All right.
Asheville, Lucy Crown.
Aye.
Art Jessica Morris.
Aye.
Fillmore Forest Harry Buckner. Black Mountain Jessica Trotman.
Aye.
Buncombe County Matt Cable.
Aye.
Buncombe Transit William High.
I abstain.
PPD Daniel Sellers.
Aye.
Clyde Joy Garland. Flat Rock Pat Christie.
Aye.
Fletcher Eric Rufa.
Aye.
Haywood County Jody Ferguson. Henderson County Autumn Radcliffe.
I like that William is staying. I was like, can I vote against it? That would be wrong, wouldn't it? I'll abstain too.
Apple Country Transit Janet Van Cooley.
Aye.
Maggie Valley Caitlin Finkel.
Aye.
Mars Hill Nathan Bennett.
Aye.
Mills River Daniel Cobb. Woodson Ricky Hurley.
Aye.
DOT Division 13 Hannah Cook. DOT Division 14 Steve Williams.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
All right, very well. Thank you all. I know this has been really weird having some of these meetings and the all virtual and then the hybrid. So we try to make things run smoothly. Sometimes it feels like it gets long-winded. If you got any suggestions of different things you want to see on the agenda or how we're doing these meetings, feel free to reach out to either me or William or directly to Tristan. So any improvements we can make, I'm all for that. All right, moving into our next business item is the 5310 project selection. And then I know we also have the next item after that is the JARC call for projects. These kind of go hand in hand. So Tristan, I know you'll probably will you need two separate motions, or if we did one motion that handles both of these, however, but it probably is going to be best to kind of talk about both of these at the same time, I think.
I agree, that's a good point. So I guess if it makes sense, we'll have Scott go through the information on both items, and I guess make a decision after that.
Okay.
All right, take it away, Scott.
All right, hello everyone, Scott Adams, Transportation Planner with Transbroad River MPO. I have been looking through applications for 5310 funds, which are Enhanced Mobility of Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities funding. This information has been in previous packets and meetings. Really just wanted to have this here for a quick overview. So in essence, the 5310 program has two sort of project types. There are traditional projects, which is more either bricks and mortar or buses and ramps. The non-traditional project types, which can be anything from travel training to a couple of projects, which I'll highlight in a moment with Flame the Sky, Regional Council Senior Companions, and also non-traditional funds can be used to supplement additional service. We could just scroll down a bit to the next page. So one quick note, I just had put this in the packet. There are two tables shown here. I actually erred in my original summary table on that first amount there. It's a little confusing with an overall amount of $511,000. The traditional practice here in the region has been to set 10% of that amount as aside for an administrative line item for the city of Asheville, since they are administering these funds to subrecipients. And then there is a 55-35 breakdown that's required as part of the funding program. Or I should say 55% as a floor, and then 35 resulting from that. I just have a quick update on the next table there, just noting that my estimates on that first table, I accidentally took the 55-35 out of the 90% amount after the 10%. set aside for the city of Asheville was taken out, when I actually should have listed that as 5535 out of the original 511,000 amount. So a little bit of nuance there, but just wanted to be clear in the numbers that I was showing. We could go to the next page. I'll just quickly get into what we've discussed to date. So that's just a quick breakdown on projects or on splits. The current projects that have applied for funds, there were 5 applications. 2 were traditional from Buncombe County for Mountain Mobility and City of Asheville Paratransit. The other 3 other applications, or I should say other funding, were Buncombe County Ride, Land of Sky Regional Council Senior Companions, and Madison County Transportation Authority. If we could go down to the next slide, I'll just give a quick walkthrough of what has been discussed to date. So again, on my initial glance and perhaps just airing of numbers, basically had the assumption that there were a number of shortfalls looking across the applications as related to total funds available. We'll scroll down to the updates. This is perhaps a much simpler view. So on the basic assumption of a 55-35 split, the other projects, that being Buncombe County Ride, Senior Companions, and Madison County, were collectively requesting $212,000 for $178,940 available. So that's a $33,000 shortfall. On January 4th, the prioritization subcommittee met to initially discuss the basic issue of the shortfall, and the decision was made to refer this to the 5307 subrecipients group, plus Madison County and Land of Sky Regional Council Senior Companions. So on January 10th, just a couple of days ago, we met to again discuss the overall issue of the potential shortfall, and the decision was made and agreed to by the City of Asheville, at least in this grant cycle, to forego their traditional 10% set aside and essentially put that back into the larger fund balance. Doing so allows all 5 projects to receive 100% of their funding requests, and just looking at that amount in yellow there, those are the total funds differences for both the other and traditional amounts, and that actually comes out to a 55-45 split. So in the end, there's just over $31,000 or 6% of total funds available that can be still allocated to the City of Asheville for administrative costs, and that's in essence the current proposal for 5310 funds. Again, to 100% fund each of the 5 applicants and their original request amounts, and then allocate the remaining funds, again, 31,000 or 6% of total funds, to the City of Asheville for administrative costs. And if we scroll down, I believe I've just got one last bit of information in there. So just taking a quick look again at the 5 projects, that is how that top line there is how they were scored. Really the only, and I did the initial scoring, really the only reason that Land of Sky Regional Council Senior Companions received the lowest score is that they're providing rides in private vehicles, so they don't have the full capacity with ADA lift vans and whatnot to provide the full range of access to people with disabilities, either wheelchairs or other mobility issues. So that's just a quick explanation there. Otherwise, this table is really just the overall review of the funds that they have requested and will be receiving pending this group and the board's approval of these proposals. So again, overall recommendation, fund the projects at their requested funding levels and allocate the remaining fund balance, 31,000 or just over 6%, to the City of Asheville for administrative costs. And with that, I think what we were talking about a moment ago was discussing both 5310 and then jumping over to 5307. So 5307 is the urbanized area formula for transit. And again, per local practice, 10% of those funds in the last, I'd say, several years have been allocated to what's called Jobs Access Reverse Commute purposes, JARC. This, again, is just a quick summary of eligible programs, and to date, the Asheville Rides Transit, I believe it's, well, I'm always going back and forth on what ART is standing for. I think it is now currently Asheville Rides Transit.
That's right.
Okay. Asheville Redefines Transit. The ART 170 bus route that operates between downtown Asheville and the edge of downtown Black Mountain, running basically along US 70, serving Squananoa, is the current, or has been the most recent primary recipient of these funds. And we'll scroll down to the next slide. We'll just briefly review what's available. So again, just over $400,000. That's about 10% of the $4 million that the region receives for 5307 funds. Capital projects can be funded at an 80-20 split. Operating projects can be funded at a 50-50 split. And going down to the next page, the current project request is for an operating project from the city of Asheville for the Route 170 bus route. So the amount being requested is just over $250,000, and there is certainly from that amount a remaining amount, and a discussion that occurred in parallel with the 5310 discussion was that in the city of Asheville deciding to forego their full 10% administrative costs within 5310, they will likely submit a follow-up application for all or a significant amount of remaining JARC funds to fund JARC-related bus routes within the city that serve job centers such as Asheville Regional Airport and also Biltmore Park Town Square. There's also the route, I believe I've got that highlighted at the bottom, that serves the Leicester area. So that's been the discussion to date. But for now, the city is currently requesting just over $250,000 for the bus route 170 and may follow up with a secondary application requesting more JARC funds. And with that, I'll take any questions, comments.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions or comments? Couple of comments and I have a question. Tristan, do you need these motions to be separate?
That would be preferred, since they are technically two separate funding streams that would be programmed separately. I know the considerations that have been made towards the programming recommendations kind of go hand in hand.
Okay.
But we will be having two different resolutions go to the board.
Okay, and I know that Jessica is on here. She may want to make the motion because I know it was discussed about that this was just for this year. This wasn't setting a precedence for future years, and I want to make sure that that is included in our motion. And Jessica, am I forgetting something else that we need to include in that?
No, I think that's good. And thank you. And yes, I would be happy to make the motion if we could scroll back up to the 5310 one. Unless there's other questions before that. Okay. So I would like to make the motion to fund the 5310 projects at their requested funding levels and allocate the remaining 5310 funds, which is $31,021 or 6% of total funds, to the city of Asheville for administration of 5310 funds to subrecipients. And would like to note that the decrease in administrative funding is not to set a precedent for future years.
Okay, and unless anyone has any questions on that motion or clarification, it needs a second.
Steve Williams, second.
Okay, thank you, Steve. All right, if y'all will take us through roll call.
Asheville, Lucy Crown.
Aye.
Art, Jessica Morris.
Aye.
Biltmore Forest, Terry Buckner.
Aye.
Black Mountain, Jessica Trotman.
Aye.
Buncombe County, Matt Cable.
Aye.
Buncombe Transit, William High.
Approve.
CPD, Daniel Sellers.
Aye.
Clyde, Joy Garland.
Aye.
Flat Rock, Pat Christie.
Aye.
Fletcher, Eric Rufa.
Aye.
Haywood County, Jody Ferguson. Henderson County, Autumn Radcliffe.
Aye.
Apple Country Transit, Jana Bianculli.
Aye.
Maggie Valley, Caitlin Finkel.
Aye.
Mars Hill, Nathan Bennett.
Aye.
Mills River, Daniel Cobb. Woodfin, Ricky Hurley.
Aye.
DOT Division 13, Hannah Cook.
Aye.
DOT Division 14, Steve Williams.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
All right, so if y'all want to scroll back down to the suggested motion for JARC. I don't believe, Jessica, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there was any additional things that needed to be added with this one necessarily, but you may want to add anything.
No, you're right. I think we're gonna submit a separate application at a later date for the remainder of the JARC funds. So I would make a motion to recommend that the city of Asheville be awarded the requested JARC funds in the amount of $254,720.
Okay, is there any discussion or questions or a second on that motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you. All right, take us through roll call again.
Asheville, Lucy Crown.
Aye.
Art, Jessica Morris.
Aye.
Biltmore Forest, Terry Buckner. Black Mountain, Jessica Trotman.
Aye.
Buncombe County, Matt Cable.
Aye.
Buncombe Transit, William High.
Approve.
CPD, Daniel Sellers.
Aye.
Clyde, Joy Garland.
Aye.
Flat Rock, Pat Christie.
Aye.
Fletcher, Eric Rufa.
Aye.
Haywood County, Jody Ferguson. Henderson County, Autumn Radcliffe.
Aye.
Apple Country Transit, Jana Bianculli. Maggie Valley, Caitlin. You're good. Maggie Valley, Caitlin Finkel.
Aye.
Mars Hill, Nathan Bennett.
Aye.
Mills River, Daniel Cobb. Woodfin, Ricky Hurley.
Aye.
Division 13, Hannah Cook.
Aye.
And Division 14, Steve Williams.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
All right, we'll move into our last business item, which is an application to DOT for TAP funds. Is that right? Because it says Safe Routes to School application in my agenda packet.
Right, it's roughly the same thing. The non-infrastructure transportation alternative program funding, or TAP, is primarily geared towards safe routes to school coordinators. That is something that I think has been much anticipated throughout much of our region, and throughout much of the state for quite a while. I've got a couple of slides, so this funding has been, I would say, relatively constant from the federal standpoint for quite some time. It's come and gone in different forms, it's funding that comes from the federal government and is made available through NCDOT. Again, this is kind of set aside for non-infrastructure. Again, primarily what they're aiming for are safe routes to school coordinators to work on educating, encouraging, and evaluating safe walking and biking practices to and from school. Our region did have 2 different coordinators. They were called active routes to school coordinators, for those of you who remember. One covered Buncombe, Madison, and Henderson County. I believe that position ended around 2018 and has been vacant since then. Another covered Haywood and Transylvania in our region, but was actually based out of Jackson County and covered the counties west of there as well. It's my understanding that position expired in June 30th of this year. As of right now, our region does not have any safe routes to school coordinators, which we see as a much needed service. Pulling out some of the statistics for youth-involved crashes by county, there's more than we would want to see. These are bicycle and pedestrian crashes involving people aged 17 and younger between 2017 and 2021. Just to note, those numbers again are higher than we would wish. So what we are proposing for going after would be requesting 3 years of funding for a regional coordinator position. They would cover the 5-county area, so Buncombe, Haywood, Henderson, Madison, and Transylvania. And a lot of the focus points would be kind of the bike to school and walk to school activities, especially in the spring when there's bike to school and walk to school month. Bicycle rodeos, which I think have been really successful events that were carried out, especially in Transylvania and Haywood County over the last few years. Other educational initiatives, there are things like traffic gardens that have been implemented. There is one in Asheville. There's a few others across the state that are essentially kind of areas where kids can learn about bike safety and riding bikes without having to be in traffic. Facilitate safety audits. That's something that Jackie Moore, who is the coordinator out of Jackson County, she did for a number of schools in Haywood County. I thought those were really successful initiatives. And also a couple of other things, remote drop-off areas. So trying to coordinate where parents can potentially drop off kids and have them walk or bike a little ways. Just to note, I think we've had at least 3 projects on the books since I've been here to try to relieve the congestion from school pickup and drop-off. So this is another potential way of looking at that and collecting travel data. So what we're proposing at this point would be for the Land of Sky Regional Council to pursue the funding for this coordinator position. Just to note that it would not be an MPO position necessarily, but that's something that the COG is eligible for applying for. And it's something we are looking for, basically approval and recommendation from this group as well as the board to pursue. Are there any questions or comments?
I would make one comment, and it's not to be negative, but if we do move this route and you do get a position, they may have to really start working with some local law enforcement and like SROs and things like that, because we have had in our county issue come up where one of our schools stopped letting parents walk their kids to school because there's a security and safety issue, which brought up a whole new level of things that we hadn't really addressed in before. And so I think as we move into the future, unfortunately, that is a reality, I'm afraid, for us. There's different things that come with that. And so that's something, if you do this position, I think they're really going to have to delve into, but I just wanted to note and make that comment because it has come up here in our county. But does anyone else have any comments or questions about this, or anyone that would like to make a motion?
This is Caitlin with the town of Maggie Valley. I just wanted to say Haywood County has benefited in the past from having this position, as Tristan mentioned with Jackie. And so I'll go ahead and make the motion to move this funding forward so that we can continue to hopefully benefit from this position.
Thank you. Is there a second?
This is
I'll
Lucy
second.
Crown. I'll second. We all want it really bad. Clearly.
Yes, I think there's lots of opportunities and things that could be explored, and maybe new initiatives even that may come out of this. Elizabeth, you may have been seconded. Did you have a question or comment though?
No, that's okay. I agree.
All right, well, I think this is our last item we actually officially have to vote on. So hopefully it's the last time we got to go through this. So roll call again.
Asheville Lucy Crown.
Aye.
Art Jessica Morris.
Aye.
Fillmore Forest Harry Buckner.
Aye.
Black Mountain Jessica Trotman. Buncombe County Matt Cable.
Aye.
Aye.
Buncombe Transit William High.
Approve.
PPD Daniel Sellers.
Approved.
Clyde Joy Garland. Aye. Flat Rock Pat Christie.
Aye.
Fletcher Eric Rufa.
Aye.
Haywood County Jody Ferguson. Henderson County Autumn Radcliffe.
Aye.
Apple Country Transit Jana Bianculli.
Aye.
Hendersonville Matt Manley.
Aye.
Maggie Valley Caitlin Finkel.
Aye.
Mars Hill Nathan Bennett.
Aye.
Mills River Daniel Cobb. Waynesville Elizabeth Teague.
Aye.
Woodfin Ricky Hurley.
Can I ask one question? Sorry. Autumn
Mhm.
or anybody, would this also address charter schools as well? Because, you know, there's a lot of vehicle traffic going to charter schools in Buncombe County. So are they going to also look at that? This coordinator? Just curious. I'm going to say aye, but just.
Yeah. Sorry.
They look at all
it's my
schools.
Yeah, it's my understanding it's just primarily geared towards students, not necessarily what type of school they're attending. I will say that our region does have a lot of schools, and we are applying for one person. So if we are successful, we will need to kind of coordinate on what schools to focus on a bit more. But I do hope we can get as much outreach as possible.
Okay. Thanks, y'all. Aye for Woodfin.
NCDOT Division 13 Hannah Cook.
Aye.
And DOT Division 14 Steve Williams.
Approved.
All right.
The ayes have it.
Thank you. We'll move into our informational items. We only have two of those. The first one is discussing performance targets.
Page Willigan.
Okay, so as of 2016, the Federal Highway Administration has established 5 highway safety performance measures in accordance with regulations set forth the federal MAP 21 and FAST Act transportation funding bills. And North Carolina state targets are set in agreement with strategic highway safety plan goals. So the goals of the most recent strategic highway safety plan is to reduce fatalities and serious injuries by half by 2030 and move towards 0 by 2050. So in this table, you can see our the MPO's 2016 to 2020 5-year average targets, and then our actual metrics in the column next to that. And you can see that we did not meet any of the targets for any of the 5 categories, but we were better than our 2014 to 2018 baseline for fatalities and the rate of fatalities. So I made a few charts just to kind of visualize our actual metrics versus the targets set by DOT over the last few years. So for fatalities, you can see we're getting closer and closer to meeting the target, and then that's our 2023 target. And then same with fatality rate, the trends are getting, we're getting closer to meeting the targets, each year. With serious injuries, we're also getting closer. There's a little bit more of a gap, but we are getting closer. Same with the rate of serious injuries. And same with non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. But with all the charts, you can kind of see that the 2023 recommended targets are pretty aggressive compared to other ones. So we don't have to make any decisions this month. There's no action required, but the MPO is kind of faced with 2 options here. You can see at the bottom of this table that these are the recommended 2023 targets for us to hit, and all of the numbers in black are the actual metrics we hit, and they're 5-year averages for each year. So we can choose to adopt these targets, which I believe is what we've done in the past. Or if we wanted to, we could use a different methodology to define our own targets, but that would require the MPO to hire someone to monitor performance metrics. And that decision needs to be made by February 27th, but there's no action required this month.
A quick question I have, is there any penalty when you don't meet these or you fall short?
Not really. So in terms of the states, when they fall short of their targets repeatedly, then I believe the requirement is to make sure that they are utilizing all of the Highway Safety Improvement Program funding at their disposal, as well as potentially update their Highway Safety Action Plan. So I wouldn't say it's too draconian of a punishment, but you know, the key here is that this is a new federal requirement, well, relatively new, and the process is the state initially sets targets, and MPOs can choose to either follow the state or go their own route. Just as a note on what we've discussed in the past with the safety performance targets, I think, you know, having a more aggressive set of targets from the state, I don't think is a bad thing. You know, overall, I think that they are trying to trend towards a 0 fatality state, I believe, over the next 25 years. So, yeah, I mean, they are setting aggressive targets that have not or rarely been met. But I don't see an issue at this point with trying to follow a more aggressive set of targets. Also to point out in discussions we've had in the past, going the route of setting our own targets, at this point in time, the only real change would be we'd have to get someone to monitor and make reports for these performance metrics. In terms of it translating into changes in investment, it's not there yet.
Okay. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Or I'm assuming there's probably going to be a consensus due to the limitations is to stay with the state's methodology. But if anyone has any real strong feelings, probably now is the time to kind of indicate that to MPO staff.
I have a question, Ricky over at Woodfin. It's not really about the metrics. I mean, I don't even know where to go with that. But my question is about the chart is like, is this based on like our population, like per 100,000 people? Is it vehicle miles traveled? That's kind of the question I have on rates. And do we know if, because we have a lot of highways, that we have a lot of out-of-state visitors, or if that's occurring on 26 or 40, is it people that are unfamiliar? Is it work zones that's causing it? Because it seems like there was a little bit of a dip in the mid-teens, and then we're climbing back up. That was pre-COVID. So, and so is there like a certain road that's causing this? Have we identified like spatially, like, is it just all over? Which it probably is. It's probably just all over, but is there things that do with the nighttime? I don't know, like the rates here, I'm glad we got it, but it's just kind of like such, I don't know, it's just a big pile of information. It doesn't have enough detail to know what we would action on, besides that we know that people have died and that people are suffering serious injury that's life altering. So it's just kind of a grave thing, but there's not really anything to do. As far as I know, I'd like to know how we could act if there's something we need to be acting on.
Yeah, I think that's a good point with Tristan. I'm kind of, when I looked at the numbers and saw the fatalities, I'm assuming the point of the performance target is geared more towards design and road safety, because some of those fatalities, I mean, if someone has a medical situation that wasn't due to the road or anything else that may have caused an accident, and I think some of those things is what Ricky was going to, but I'm assuming that's kind of the objective is more geared towards the design and how the road is functioning more than some of those other outside things.
Right. So, Ricky, to your question on rates, it is based on VMT. So the numbers you see is based on, I believe it's per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. So just FYI there, with fatalities and fatality rate, Autumn's spot on. There's a lot of different factors that play into it. And this is why I always give a little bit of caution when folks request crash rates, is that, there's things like seatbelt usage is a big determining factor between whether it's, basically a serious crash or a fatal crash. The size of vehicles, things like that. And in all honesty, we have a number of crashes on roads that I don't think you could design a whole lot more safely. But, there are these kind of freak incidents of, people randomly going 40 or 50 miles over the speed limit, and it ending in tragedy. All that, I don't mean to say that, like, there is no action necessary, but in terms of looking at safety, it's things like that where engineering plays a huge role in it, and looking at where those factors are that can be designed better, I think is very important. But the education and enforcement piece is also another part that shouldn't be forgotten either.
Okay, does anyone have any other questions or comments? All right, we'll move on to our next informational item, which should be just as fun. The 2020 urbanized area. Gotta love when it's a new census time.
Yes. fun is the key word here. The U.S. Census defines urban and rural areas every 10 years after the decennial census. You know, even though a lot of the data released from the 2020 census happened quite a while ago, the urban-rural data was just recently released. Just as a little bit of background, these are slides from MPO orientation. Just a little bit about how the urban areas have been defined and identified in the past. Basically looking at, you know, a dense settled core of census tracts or blocks that meets the minimum population density requirements. That's what's been done over the last few decades, and kind of looking at how the urban area connects beyond that core. In terms of the urbanized area and the MPO, the urbanized area basically serves as a basis for the MPO's boundaries. So what is in the Asheville urbanized area is the bare minimum of what we have to have in the MPO boundaries per the federal regs. The MPO planning area shall encompass at least the existing urbanized area, as well as the contiguous area expected to become urbanized within a 20-year forecast period from the transportation plan. This plays a big role, or essentially what's determined as the urbanized area, plays a big role in terms of the MPO's operations in our planning area. Then, just as a reminder, the MPO has been around since the 60s, first centered around Asheville, and it has been growing ever since. Henderson and Haywood have been included since 2000, and little bits of Madison and Transylvania were added in 2010. However, to note, there have been a lot of changes made to the urbanized area criteria for this go-round. So the U.S. Census Bureau has moved away from a lot of the population density requirements and more towards housing unit requirements. They made a number of other changes, but one of the big ones that has impacted us was a change in what's called the maximum jump distance. That's kind of looking at the distance between the urban area. Well, if you have two areas identified as urban, previously, if there was a 2.5 mile divide between them, they would do a jump. And so those two areas would be combined into one urbanized area. In 2020, that was revised, and the maximum jump is now 1.5 miles. So those jumps have been shortened. So what you see is the 2010 urbanized area, and what I've kind of highlighted in red are some of those key jumps around our region. Kind of the big ones for us, starting from the north, Mars Hill kind of connecting down to the Weaverville, Jupiter urban area. That has been quite a jump. Also kind of into Candler connecting over to Canton, and even Canton over to Clyde and Waynesville. A jump that we've talked about in the past is kind of between Henderson County and Brevard. That has also been on the radar as well, but Brevard has been part of the Land to Sky RPO. So in the release of the 2020 urbanized areas, at first what was released were just the urban areas. And what we saw were new urban areas that were identified. Besides Brevard remaining its own urbanized area of about 13,000 people, Canton is a new urbanized area of almost 9,000, meaning it has been separated from the Asheville urbanized area. Also, the Waynesville urbanized area of almost 25,000 in population is a new one as well. And just to note, the Waynesville urbanized area is fairly enormous. It stretches up Jonathan Creek Road. It stretches through Maggie Valley. Maggie Valley is a newly identified urban area, and it even goes into Jackson County. So it is a pretty big urbanized area. As of right now, with the federal regs, an urbanized area has to have a population of at least 50,000 in order to have its own MPO. So earlier this week, we finally got the maps that reflect the urban areas. The link to it's on the bottom. We'll post these slides in a bit. But you can kind of see that the Asheville urbanized area is highlighted and has been severed from Haywood County and Mars Hill. And the connection over to Brevard has not gotten much closer. We did go ahead and make a map that reflects kind of the areas that or where the urban identified areas have grown, where it shrunk, and where it stayed the same. So what you see there, the yellow is what has kind of stayed the same between 2010 and 2020. The red is where the urban area has shrunk, and the green is where the urban area has grown. Weirdly, quite a bit of shrinking as well as quite a bit of growth through the region. One thing to note with the maps that have been released, just to note the connection between the Canton urbanized area and the Asheville urbanized area, the divide is just under 2.1 miles. So basically that change in the jump distance is what determined that. The divide between Mars Hill and kind of the North Buncombe urbanized area, that is a little more than 3 miles. So the change in criteria was one of the big things there. We are also starting to put together data on where urbanization is expected in the next 20 years. What you see in yellow are kind of the areas that meet the housing unit density requirement. So this doesn't look at all of the different criteria. We don't have all of the data that helps to form that definition. The yellow is where the housing unit density threshold is met. The green is where it's expected to expand. The thing I'd note here, not to make things too complicated, but this is based on the MPO's preferred growth scenario, which for those of you who were around for those discussions, that is the growth scenario that is essentially aiming to reduce sprawl and put more of the projected development into the already urbanized areas. So what we're showing in the areas expected to urbanize is based on that scenario. Some of the other scenarios that we've looked at, the business as usual, I won't say it's radically different, but it certainly pulls in a lot more of the region over the next 20 years. To pull back just some kind of high-level stats in terms of the Asheville urbanized area, even though Haywood and Mars Hill have kind of been severed from the urbanized area, the population still grew by more than 5,000 people. And that's, again, even with the square miles of that urbanized area being reduced. Meanwhile, across the state, the urbanized population grew quite a bit by more than 600,000. And so the percent of the total population that is considered urbanized increased as well. In terms of next steps, getting the maps earlier this week was a very, very helpful step. So we'll be having discussions to consider directions from local governments. Just to point out, if the MPO membership remains the same, no changes are needed to the MOU. Dues for local government will be recalculated with the 2020 population. If any member governments choose to leave the MPO, we will need to redo the MOU with a memorandum of understanding. That requires a sign off from every member government council. And I would just note that due structures would likely change significantly. In terms of likely impacts to Haywood, one of the big things here is that their transit funding is very likely to change. We've had a little bit of back and forth with NCDOT on this, but essentially Haywood County not being part of the Asheville urbanized area, but having urban areas within their county still identified, means that they would be eligible for 5307 small urban funds, rather than the large urban funds that they receive right now. So right now, Haywood County gets those 5307 transit funds through an agreement with the city of Asheville. The small urban funds have generally been through DOT in the past. Evidently, they're moving to a direct recipient structure for their small urban systems. But it sounds like there's going to be a lot more to unpack there. So how exactly that transition would happen and some other options are yet to be determined. But beyond that, you know, one of the big things that I've been asked about is access to planning funds as well as SDBG, TAP, and Carbon Reduction Program funds, the CRPDA. Essentially, that is largely determined by MPO membership, although I'll note that the MPO's allotment of funds is based on our urbanized population for most of those funding pools. And I would note that if a local government chose to leave the MPO, one of the big things that we want to discuss are incomplete lab projects. That is, you know, having a locally administered project and have its status leave the MPO, we would have to revisit the funding and try to find the best path forward for that project. Anyway, that's a whole lot of information, but at this point, we are still kind of information gathering and hoping to have some more discussions very, very soon, especially because our draft planning work program is due next month. And I know that getting kind of the dues to our dues paying members is something we'd like to do sooner rather than later. But at this point, are there any questions or comments?
Tristan, do you think you could share your PowerPoint that kind of walked through that? It sort of simplified it and made it easy for TCC as staff in case they get asked anything by their elected officials.
Absolutely. We'll post that and send it out.
It's actually already uploaded on the agendas and minutes page on the website.
Oh, even better.
Perfect. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
I'm sorry if you mentioned this, Tristan, but is there any challenging that can happen? Like Henderson is like, it's confusing because I don't know if it's like 1/10 of a mile, but like the Henderson part, which they're labeling Asheville UZA, doesn't actually touch any of the UZA that connects to Asheville. And I feel like it's weird.
Yes, it is weird. So another part of the criteria that they've changed is that in those kind of hops and jumps, Previously, that, the area in between would just be identified as urban. They've stopped doing that, so we do have some islands and things like that around the region. In terms of challenging the census urbanized area, what they've made clear in their materials is that if we find that their data assumptions are incorrect, then that is something that we can make a challenge on. But trying to come with a more qualitative argument, I don't think is something that they will be willing to take on. So if there are areas where the housing unit density we feel like wasn't properly addressed or documented, that should have been, that's something that we can use in an appeal, but it has to be data driven.
Okay, and I guess I'm gonna read through the circular for the urbanized area formula for basically 5307, but that is a concern of mine because we run routes that traverse that gap, and so I'm trying to see, like, is that an issue or if it's not an issue. And it also looks like I-26 and US 25 are used to delineate UZA and non-UZA, and so, like, what does that mean for transit stops that are mirrored? And so, like, you might have a stop that's now technically not in the UZA. I don't know if y'all have plans on working with us further on that or not.
Yeah, I think that'll be a big point in kind of the next 5307 subrecipients work group meeting. Also to point out, this does necessitate us revisiting the 5307 sub-allocation formula, one way or the other, because with FDA's ruling, they have said that, the 2010 urban area can be referenced for funding through FY23, but for funding allocated in FY24 and later, the 2020 urban area is what needs to be referenced. So for us, what that means is, from all the documents I've gotten, we are going to have to redo that formula for our region to reflect Haywood County moving to another funding source. So the funding formula would then be for Asheville, Buncombe County, and Henderson County.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments? I think for me, this is kind of like, here's our snapshot that we've got until the next census. Although I question some of the stuff in this because I feel like during COVID and everything and some of the time constraints that were with that census, it's not necessarily completely accurate. So I have a feeling when that next census comes out with the urbanized area, my prediction is it's going to look like a really huge growth because we didn't capture some of the stuff. Because some of the areas are questionable of where it's declined and or grown. So that's kind of my 2 cents. But does anyone else have anything else you want to add? Tristan,
Scott,
go ahead.
This is Scott. I'll just make a quick note, just in my read of kind of the changes in the methodology between 2010 and 2020. Something interesting that I saw that I think is especially relevant to this region is that the shift from, population density to housing unit density, that was a consideration for areas that have either a lot of second homes or seasonal population shifts, and that's certainly relevant in this area. At least my quick read of the census information that was provided was essentially, housing units are a much more, constant, tangible data point than population. Certainly, if you get seasonal population shifts. So, long story short, whether you're in a coastal or mountain area or whatever else, I think it's I guess the argument from the census is if you've got, sort of a seasonal population shift either between seasons, second homes, what have you, housing units are more of a constant. So that's one quick read on the change in the methodology. So just a quick bit of information there.
Yeah, that's a good point, Scott. I think that's why you saw such a huge expansion, probably Waynesville, Maggie Valley, because it picked up those that weren't normally counted as part of the population. So I think you're definitely correct. One thing I'm going to mention to Tristan, I know you're going to be presenting this to the MPO board, the TAC, 2 weeks from now, which is going to be your elected officials, particularly for those jurisdictions that are seeing a change. They're probably going to have some questions. But one question that may come up for them that will come up with as a staff, I know we have time. Anytime there's a change like this with the census, I mean, we know that's going to take time, particularly if any of the membership was to change that now requires going back to all of those councils and boards. I mean, that's going to take a few months getting on the agendas and stuff, but it may be asked kind of timeline of like when those decisions will need to be made, and then when all those, if it does require any of those kind of changes, kind of time frame. I know we got time. I'm expecting maybe a year, but I don't know what that is. But that may be a question that comes up at that next meeting.
Yeah, and just to note, I think that's something that's been somewhat challenging for us. Is a lot of the guidance that's been provided from federal highways hasn't been updated in a while. So the last thing we got referenced an urban area release date of October 1st. That is not the most up to date. But in terms of the federal regs, I mean, the situation we're in is a bit different. So the deadlines for the MPOs to reconsider their planning boundaries, again, it goes back to that requirement of the MPO has to have at least the urbanized area and the area expected to urbanize. I would say as of right now, our planning boundaries very much meet that. I think the situation that we have is that, this doesn't happen very often, every 10 years. And so this is kind of an opportunity to discuss, potential membership preferences and things like that. As far as I'm aware, I don't think we are under the gun to make any of these changes. But again, just to note, I mean, if we are making these changes, they're going to have, if we make significant changes to the planning boundaries, they would have significant changes to the dues structure at the MPO. And I think the last thing I really want to do is give a month or two heads up that dues are going way up, or local governments are paying dues to another organization. I think this is something, we'll be discussing a lot more, and, trying to facilitate those conversations as effectively as we can.
Okay, does anyone have anything else?
This is
All right.
Daniel.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you made a comment earlier about maybe in 2020, the boundaries popping back up. And I'll just say the change in the jump distance to 1.5 miles from 2.5 miles undid the change that happened between the 2000 and the 2010 census, which at the time a lot of people thought was the big jump, and kind of grabbed a lot of areas across the nation that maybe didn't feel as urbanized as one would think. So, this was just a reversion to the 2000 standard. So we'll see if they play with it more, but every 10 years they do add other bits and bobs of criteria. For example, in 2010 was the first time they started using impervious surface as a measurement to capture things like large parking lots and shopping malls and stuff that don't have any population living in them. So we'll see. The The other thing I'll just randomly float out there because it caught my eye staring at this map. Your urban boundaries are getting very close to some other counties. Black Mountain is right on the county line. Haywood already crosses into Jackson. And near Etowah, y'all swapped with the MPO's UZA pulling back some, but the Brevard UZA pushing towards the county line. So there are some, interesting things to track over the next 20 years.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I will say, just looking at it, the gap between Ridgecrest and Old Fort, that is a big, long gap. We don't have data on the projections for that, but I would be very, very surprised if Old Fort Mountain urbanizes on that stretch.
I would be very surprised at that also.
Right. I mean, the National Forest would have to put it in some hotels through there. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things to consider here. I mean, as we put in the packet nationally, I think the general appetite was to kind of pull back on what's defined as urbanized and not. I think as the U.S. Census Bureau noted that nationally, based on the new criteria, it actually reduced the urbanized population or redefined it for about 4 million people. And so, all in all, I think, there were some things in national media noting that, the urban-rural divide is something that's kind of been somewhat poorly defined, and a lot of areas that see themselves as rural have been identified as urban for the last 10 to 20 years. And so I do think that a lot of the criteria that's been changed has been trying to address a lot of that. I do think that, again, this is going to be a big, I think, discussion point moving forward. And that's something to discuss definitely with Haywood and Mars Hill in more depth, but with membership at large. So this is something we'll keep bringing up as necessary.
All right, thank you. All right, regular updates. NCDOT Division 13.
Yes, I think there's a link to both the project development and the construction updates that we provide every month. I don't know if Hannah or Tristan want to pull those up for you guys to see on the screen. Looks like it. All right, great. So that's project development. So I'll just start with project development update. So this is the format that Steve Williams and Division 14 and I have been sharing with you guys for many months at this point, but it's essentially just a printout, a side-by-side comparison of the current 2020 to 2029 step compared to the draft 2024 to 2033 step, specifically the August 2022 version of the draft step. So I don't know of any significant project schedule changes that have been approved the past several months for the current step, but essentially this is just a way for you guys to check side by side, comparing the two for our step projects.
Hannah, would you be willing to give a quick update on Sweeten Creek Road?
Actually, it might be more appropriate for Steve Cannon, if he's still on the call, to give that update, since I've missed most of the recent meetings around Sweeten Creek Road. Steve, are you with us still? Could you give an update?
I can. Excuse me. Can y'all hear me good?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So we're in the process of looking at turning that project back on for design, since it's in the deliverable portion of the draft step. But we've had some meetings here recently. We met here at the beginning of January to do an express design on that project as well, to look at what impacts would be from a 3-lane section. Now, realizing that a 3-lane section will most likely reduce the level of service on that roadway and could potentially take us back to purpose and need discussion. We wanted to see what that cost would be, what the impacts would be along that corridor, and what that cost would be, so that we could have that discussion here in March. So the goal of the firm that's doing the express design is to have that data in place to us by the end of February with an alignment and impacts. So kind of rough and quick to get an estimate on that. With the primary cost of that project, for those that may not be familiar, that project has reached an estimate of about 257 million, with 149 million of that being right away. So looking to see if we reduce that footprint, will they bring that right away cost down or not before we proceed. Want to be sure we get the most bang for our buck essentially, and for our folks here in the area. So that's where we're at on that one. We'll have more information. We'll have a meeting right at the end of February, and be coming to the prioritization committee with that information in the first part of March.
Thank you, Steve.
Yep, thanks, Steve.
You're welcome.
All right, anything else with Division 13 questions? All right.
I will run through just real quick, the construction updates. I'll keep it brief. Do like to always touch on the I-26 project, what's going on, specifically Buncombe County section from I-40 to Airport Road. The contractor is still working on constructing the westbound lanes from Long Shoals Road to Brevard Road, and that work is continuous. And they're expecting it to be completed by mid to late summer of this year. Construction on the new Blue Ridge Parkway Bridge is also underway. Once the new westbound side is complete, obviously the contractor plans to shift traffic to the new westbound alignment and then start upgrading the eastbound direction to the 4 lanes as well. So the overall project is on schedule and is scheduled to be completed spring of next year. So one other thing I wanted to touch on was the intersection improvement at Hendersonville Road at Overlook Road. Work has slowed down out there due to just unfavorable weather conditions, but the contractor does continue to work whenever possible. They're actively pursuing construction of curb and gutter whenever the weather allows, and they plan to renew paving operations in March. We've run into seasonal limitations on our asphalt, so I believe there were lots of also like utility conflicts out there that affected the overall completion date of the project. So we've got a revised anticipated completion being June of this year for that intersection improvement. But that's all for me, unless anybody else had any questions.
Okay, thank you. And we'll move into Division 14.
All right, so on the project development side, just what Hannah said as far as the format goes for that, and also there have not been any significant schedule changes since we last met. So same projects you've been seeing for a while. Do you have any questions about those before we go to construction updates? All right. So on the construction side of things, that first project there in Haywood County, one of the resurfacing projects on I-40, the surface course remains to be laid down. That won't happen until springtime when things are going back up. Another resurfacing there on I-40 will start next spring as well. That string of bridge projects there are the ones there near Jonathan Creek Road intersects I-40. And that is narrowed down to 1 lane in each direction. So beware if you're headed that way. And everything else, just the projects you've been seeing for a while, including that intersection at Walnut in Maine there in Waynesville. I-26 is business as usual there as far as traffic shifts and such as they complete either the eastbound or the westbound section and shifting traffic over to work on the other side. Note that the schedule has been pushed out. Its completion schedule has been pushed out several months. Not really any major issues other than the weather problems that have been encountered over the last 3 or 4 months. Henderson County, again, the same projects you've been seeing for a while. The I-26, the Green River Bridge on I-26. Still working on the center section of the bridge, and then traffic will shift. U5887 Highland Lake Road continue to have major issues with utility relocations. That's why if you go out there, you see that there's some mobilization, some erosion control measures and such, but major construction has not started on that. And that's pretty much it for the construction updates. Do anybody have any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we'll get an update on the transportation planning branch from Daniel.
Okay, just I'm going to be speaking mainly from the Freight and Logistics newsletter this month. Before I get into that, I will announce we did have a departure in our branch, Natasha Young, who you may not know by name, but who has been leading a lot of our efforts that you've probably seen. She does most of our statewide kind of big initiative plans. So something like the statewide freight plan, statewide the carbon reduction plans, parking, freight truck parking plans. And so she's left and she got a job at with the division state engineer's office. So we'll be looking to backfill that job soon, but it was a lot of good stuff came out over the last couple of years. So anyways, moving on to the freight bulletin. As one may expect, congestion was getting worse in November compared to October, measured by a couple percentage points. But what I found interesting was that the amount of VMT, the amount of actual traffic on the priority freight network was decreasing, which means the congestion and the delay cost per VMT went up, even more, compounded between that. What interests me, it was an increase of say, 3% per month, which over a year is a lot of, accumulating delay. And I don't know how much of this is the long tail of kind of congestion coming back after COVID, after people weren't driving for a long time. But we're now seeing, let me see if I can see this. Almost 1 million miles of delay, excuse me, not miles, 1 million hours of delay per month, just among our commercial vehicles. And that has pretty huge cost to the state. The other thing that the bulletin tracks is top 10 bottlenecks. And surprise, surprise, we had 3 intersections or stretches in Western North Carolina jump up to be bottlenecks this month. And they're all in the Clyde-Canton area, exit 20, exit 33, exit 44. Excuse me, not 40, that's down in Fletcher. 2 of them at exit 20. And according to the report, it was because of several days that experienced more than 5 hours of delay due to incidents and crashes. And overall, statewide, crashes are becoming a bigger impact into congestion and delay. November was a 12% increase over October and a 24% increase year over year from November 2021. And year to date, which is through November of 21, 48% increase in the average amount of delay caused by crashes and incidences. So that peaked a couple months ago and seems to be correlated with the price of gasoline. So we will see, if this is just more people getting on the road causing more crashes, or if people were driving aggressively. But those type of year-over-year increases are pretty shocking. The rest of the bulletin moves on to discuss some maritime freight issues and rates, dry Baltic index, and inventories at stores, and how people were building up for the winter sales season, which has now passed. So if you're interested in those bulletins, I find it fascinating. It's only a little 2-pager and it gets sent out every month. But I'll take any questions.
Daniel, you mentioned that the delay is up relative to last month or last year. Have you seen any comparison to 2019?
I have not. That's obviously something we can email Dana about and try to get. The bulletin seems to be a month-over-month tracker. I was getting asked about comparisons to 2019 for some other data lately, and it was incredibly hard to track down. But yes, I think, without comparing to pre-COVID, a lot of these, are just surrounded by a little too much uncertainty. The other thing I'll say that I want to email and try to get a handle on, if anybody has ideas on how to do it, is since the top 10 bottlenecks change every month, the reported cost of delay of the top 10 bottlenecks is iffy. In my mind, it went up last month by 30%. But since it's all different locations, is that a change in how bad congestion is, or is that just a change in the locations identified? And the subsequent measure of commercial VMT matters, because different roads could have different amounts of trucks on them. So I don't know if there's a way to kind of track and normalize month to month, kind of like what the Kate Schiller index does. But I'm gonna try to pursue that, or I'm going to try to float it to the powers that can pursue that.
Okay, I mean, that would be interesting to track. Just FYI, here's some data that we pulled from RIDIS and NREX that shows total hours of delay throughout North Carolina that was confirmed, and it still shows total hours of delay very much reduced compared to 2019, but I'll note that that's passenger and commercial vehicles, so I'd just be interested.
Yeah, that looks like the data in the bulletin at 1.3 million last month.
Okay, well, it would just be interesting to keep looking at that, because I do think that, one of the big things we've seen with some of the data coming from 2021, 2022 is that the volumes are coming back online, but delay is changing, and it appears that people's travel patterns have been changing. But I think the big question for everyone is that temporary, or are we going to see that continuing well after kind of what happened in 2020? So I mean, getting more of this information, I think would be really interesting to track.
Yeah, three new things since we have plenty of time. One, Dana's release email did say that they're going to do a year in review, and that could be something we press them on to include. And then two other things. We did recently release, TPD released the 2021 traffic counts. I don't know if I mentioned it last month, but that I think came out mid-December or early December. But I was just reminded this morning is the shapefile seems to be very difficult to find. So if you want to use that data, the web viewer seems to be the only way right now. But I'm going to try to follow up with TSG. They've released it every previous year. I don't know why the shapefile is not available quite yet. And then thirdly, I read a research report a couple months ago that talked about people's driving habits when gas prices got high. The assumption, kind of our previous assumption, is that most of the drop in VMT or the drop in gas consumption we see is from people taking fewer trips, because you don't want to take a trip when gas prices are very high. But this new research indicated that seemed to only be half the reduction of consumption, and the other half was just people driving slower and more efficiently. And I could see that having an impact on habits and congestion. Also, people maybe were more conscious of avoiding periods of congestion when gas was high. So there's a lot to unravel.
Okay. Daniel, anything else? Any questions for Daniel about any of that? All right, Trista, is there anyone to do the FHWA or FTA updates? Or do you have?
I didn't see Bill Marley pop online. Did Bill join us? I don't think we have anyone from FHWA or FTA today. Okay, I didn't think I saw anybody on here on the call, and I can't really see who's in that room. Okay, well, we'll just skip that unless there's something you want to note and go straight into the subcommittee, work groups, all that good stuff. I'll just be really brief. We're going to start putting in more details into your agenda packets on what's going on with the subcommittees. The subcommittees are definitely ramping back up, and there's going to be a lot of items working through those groups. Special note, the 5307 subrecipient work group, as we talked about before, they discussed 5310 and JARC, but the 5307 sub-allocation formula is definitely going to be a point of discussion in the next meeting. And the Hellbender work group is working on putting together a Greenway forum for the region. If that's something you're interested in joining, we'd love to have you and get in touch with Hannah on our team to get on the mailing list for that. But other than that, I won't read through every bullet point here. Does anyone have any specific questions though? All right, any legislative updates? No real legislative updates, but I will give a couple of quick updates on some federal rules, regulations, NOFOs. So some of you may remember that there was some rulemaking to have greenhouse gas targets added as a federal performance measure. So some of the initial rules on that were finally released earlier this week. The FTA Areas of Persistent Poverty Program, NOFO, was also released earlier this week. That has been distributed to the transit folks in our region. Also, EPA announced its intention to propose reducing the PM, or the particulate matter 2.5 standard from 12 parts per million to 9 to 10 parts per million. I think that was something that was proposed back in 2018 and was later rescinded. So FYI there. Also, I hope this is going to be something very helpful for everyone, because I get asked this a lot, is when are the NOFOs coming out for different programs? And I'm happy to say that Federal Highways has put together a schedule, a rough schedule, I guess I should say, on a lot of the programs. We have the link to the website at the bottom of the page. I'm not sure if you all can see it, but that's also on the PowerPoint slides. So that to me is very nice, as I think some of the NOFOs that came out last year were, I won't quite say surprise attack, but something similar. And also, just to note, Jane sent this out to the group, but DOT's annual bike helmet initiative is accepting applications through February 3rd. So that's something that a lot of the jurisdictions in our region, as well as some nonprofits, have taken advantage of in the past, where you can request bike helmets, I think up to 100, to distribute throughout the community. So that's been a great initiative, and again, the application window is now open. So just a few things to note there. Just a couple of other things. North Carolina Transportation Summit will be going on in Raleigh next week, Wednesday and Thursday. The spot work group continues to meet. Myself and Vicki Eastland from the Land and Sky RPO are representatives from the West. We had a meeting earlier this morning, and we'll be meeting in 2 weeks in person in Hillsborough to discuss potential action items. We'll keep you all updated on what changes happen there. And also I want to give a shout out to Hannah on our team. If you noticed an extra thick consent agenda this month, that is a lot of the grants that Hannah has been working on and assisting with. There's been a lot of interest, and Hannah, I think, has been a huge help in that initiative and getting us in position to try to take advantage of that program. So a big thanks to Hannah.
All right, is there any announcements, updates, topics for next meeting? Tristan, is there any topics coming up in February we need to be thinking about now?
So the draft Unified Planning Work Program, that's something that'll have to be adopted in February. And that is going to include special studies as well as MPO work tasks. Also, as Logan presented on, the safety performance targets, that's something that is a requirement for us to pass and adopt by February 27th. And that is something that has gotten a lot of discussion in the past, so we did want to kind of have a dry run this month before bringing it back for official adoption next month.
Okay. Just as a reminder, if anyone else on TCC attends, I think your MPO board starts their new schedule right for this year, so they'll actually be meeting next week, not in 2 weeks. I think I said 2 weeks earlier when I mentioned them. Just if anybody else attends those, don't forget about that. And with that, is there any other public comment? Last call.
Sorry, one last note. I guess I'll consider it public comment, but we did release the public survey for the draft CIP. So please distribute that as you see fit. We're asking for information on what projects are priorities, what projects are, we're calling them not a priority, but we're really looking for, what projects people think are stinkers. And so that's information that's been, I think, really helpful in some of the discussions and previous draft tips. Getting the word out would be most helpful.
Okay, very good. Well, with that, hearing no other public comment, we are adjourned. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.